Peace be unto you, my Christian friends, through our Lord and Savior Jesus. Amen. We continue our Bible cover to cover, and this week we read Genesis 46 through Exodus 40. Okay? In Genesis chapter 46, as this book concludes, Jacob and his whole family end up moving to Egypt and then settle in the land of Goshen. I don't know how many of you are reading it. Why was the land of Goshen selected for Jacob's family to settle? Anybody remember?
It was very fertile and one of the best parts of the land.
Okay. And it was also away from most of the Egyptians because they felt shepherds were detestable. Kind of, cross the tracks kind of thing. Yeah. In 47 of Genesis, Jacob first meets Pharaoh and blesses this man. The famine, unfortunately, though, rages on because Jacob and family end up getting there. There's 5 years left this 7-year famine, right? Jacob was 17 years in Egypt before he ultimately dies. In 48, Jacob's 2 sons, Manasseh and Ephraim, Joseph's 2 sons, did I say Jacob? Are essentially adopted by Jacob and blessed as part of Jacob's family. Why did this happen? Well, see, when they return to the promised land, both Manasseh and Ephraim will receive land, whereas neither Joseph nor Levi received land allotments in the promised land. And so the 12 tribes that we refer to in the promised land really include Joseph's 2 sons as well. In chapter 49, Jacob blesses his sons, and then he dies. In fact, the text tells us when Jacob had finished giving instruction to his sons, he drew his feet up into the bed, breathed his last, and was gathered to his people. This happened with Jacob, with Isaac, as well as Abraham. In my ministry through the years, I've had an inkling that people coming close to death have a kind of sixth sense about things and just know the time is not going to be long. And they just kind of lay down, quit eating, and then die. And that's okay. That's okay. In chapter 50, the last chapter of Genesis, Joseph and his brothers mourn now the death of their father and give him a proper burial, but back in Canaan. Okay, so they leave Egypt, travel back to their homeland, bury their dad, and come back. Now that dear old dad is dead, of course, the brothers wonder if Joseph will repay them for all their misdeeds to him. Joseph instead says, "You intended harm to me, no question about it. But God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. So then don't be afraid, I will provide for you and your children," and reassured them and spoke kindly to them. You know, you and I look at all the events of our life, and it don't always look rosy and pretty, does it? But God's intention is to bring good out of that. That's His promise. He doesn't say you'll see how or understand all those questions. That's where we have faith, do we not? Joseph then dies at the end of this chapter of Genesis at the ripe old age of 110 years old. You know, putting together all the forefathers, the patriarchs, Abraham entered the land of Canaan when he was already 75 years old. Ishmael is born when Abraham is 86 years old. Isaac finally is born 100 years old for Abraham, right? Okay? The Mount Moriah incident where Abraham at 115 almost sacrificed his son Isaac, Isaac being 15 years old at that time. Isaac who weds Rebekah. Abraham is 140, and Isaac by this time is 40 years old. Isaac is 60 years old when his 2 sons, Esau and Jacob, are born. Okay? Abraham dies when Jacob is but 15 years old, and Isaac by this time is 75 years old. Jacob then goes and flees to Haran when he is 77 years old, because he cheated his brother out of the birthright. Remember that? Isaac at that point is 137 years old. Okay? Jacob then weds both Leah and Rachel when he is 84 years old. Can you imagine a guy first marrying at 84 years old? Yeah, talk about a virile kind of guy. Isaac by this time is 144 years old. Yeah. Joseph, his favorite son, is born when Jacob is 91 years old. Okay? They end up moving back to Canaan because he was with Laban, father's house, when Jacob is 97 years old. And Joseph by this time is just a elementary school student, 6 years old, right? Joseph gets sold into slavery, and Jacob by this time is 108, and Joseph is 17 years old. And finally, Isaac dies when Jacob is 120 years old. By this time, Joseph is 29, although not in the area. He's in Egypt at this point, right? Okay? Joseph then rules in Egypt. Jacob back home is 121. We think that Joseph came to rulership in Egypt when he was 30 years old. Many commentators see a connection between Jesus starting his ministry at what age? 30. But the Bible itself does not make that connection. So whether it is to be connected or not, we cannot say. Jacob then moves to Egypt, where we picked it up today in Genesis. He's 130 years old. Joseph by this time is 39 years old. Jacob then dies at 147 years old, when Joseph is 56. Joseph himself dies when he's 110. And that's the book of Genesis. Beginning in Exodus chapter 1, a new king comes to rule in Egypt that does not remember Joseph. And you get this ooh music in the background, right? Since the Israelites have grown so large, the new king fears they will turn against him and join the enemies of Egypt if there should be any kind of battle or struggle. So the Egyptians enslave the Israelites and give orders to kill all the boy babies by throwing them into the Nile River. Can you imagine the stench that river must have had with all these floating carcasses? Gross. Chapter 2, the birth of Moses is reported. But to protect him against the edict of the king, his mother hides him in a basket on the Nile River. And along comes, guess who? Pharaoh's daughter discovers him and right away falls in love with him, adopts Moses as his own. After Moses is grown, he never forgets his heritage. He sees his own people being mistreated by the taskmasters, and he tries to intervene, ending up killing the Egyptian taskmaster. This then causes Moses to have to flee for his life to the land of Midian. While in Midian, Moses marries Zipporah and they have a son. Meanwhile, back in Egypt, the slavery intensifies and the Israelites cry out to God for help. Chapter 3, Moses is tending the flocks of his father-in-law Jethro. Notice where all this is taking place. The Sinai mountain region, which about 40 years hereafter, Moses is going to come right back to this same place with the children of Israel. Okay? There, the Lord appears to Moses in a burning bush and tells him to go back to Egypt to free the Israelites. Well, of course, Moses is not too eager to do that. He uses all kinds of excuses not to obey God. In fact, Moses said to God, suppose I go to the Israelites and I say to them, the Lord, the God of your fathers, has sent me to you. And they ask me, well, what is his name? And I'll be dumbfounded. I won't know. So what is it? What shall I tell him? God said to Moses, I am who I am. This is what you are to say to the Israelites. I am has sent me to you. This is the holy name for God in the Old Testament. It's literally in Hebrew, Yahweh. It is first singular of the word to be. I am. And only God can say, I am. There was a time when you and I were not. And then we became, right? We are not I am. And there will become a time when we will not be as well. With our death. Only God is from beginning to end. I am. Chapter 4, Moses is still not satisfied with God's answers to his excuses, so God gives him 3 miracles that he can perform to convince his Israelites, throw your staff down, it becomes a snake, reach into your hem of your garment, pull your hand back out, it becomes leprous, and then pour some water from the Nile River on the ground, and it will turn blood right in front of their eyes. Moses is still not satisfied. Moses said, Lord, please send someone else. Boy, if Moses isn't like you and me, I don't know who is, okay? How many times have I said, no, I don't want to do that, Lord. I don't want to go there. I don't want to say that. I don't want to do this. Does the Lord take a no for an answer? Have you learned that? No, he doesn't. Then the Lord's anger burned against Moses and said, what about your brother Aaron, the Levite? I know he can speak. Acted very well. He is already on his way to meet you, and his heart will be glad when he sees you. So, finally, okay, Moses with Aaron now returned to Egypt. Moses and Aaron brought together all the elders of the Israelites, and Aaron told them, notice who's speaking? Moses can't talk very well. Told them everything the Lord said to Moses, and he also performed the signs before the people. And guess what? They believed. But it's kind of on again, off again, as you're going to see as we move through the text. Chapter 5, Pharaoh refuses to let the Israelites go and orders no more straw for brick making. Now the Israelites have to gather their own straw without slacking on the quota of the bricks. Okay? The Israelites blame Moses and Aaron, and of course Moses goes right to the Lord in prayer and complains. Oh Lord, why have you brought trouble upon these people? Is this why you sent me? Ever since I went to Pharaoh to speak in your name, he has brought trouble upon this people, and you have not rescued your people at all. How is this working, Lord? Doesn't appear to be, right? In Exodus 7 and 8 begins the plagues in Egypt. First the Nile turns blood. How gross was that? Then frogs overrun Egypt. Creepy crawling things, okay? The plague of gnats. It gets worse than the plague of flies. Ugh. Ugh. And each and every time, Pharaoh changes his mind as soon as the plague is removed. Oh, please, pray that the plague will go and you can leave. You can go worship your God. Then the plague is gone, and Pharaoh says, nope, I was just joking. Chapter 9 is the plague on livestock. Then the plague of boils. Then the plague of hail. So large that it kills animals and people. This time Pharaoh's heart was hardened by the Lord, that he refused to let the people go. God gives us an opportunity to respond to his calling. And how long that opportunity extends is up to the Lord. And if we continually say, yes, but not yet, or I don't know about it, and we postpone it, and so forth, we could come to the day where that opportunity to respond to God's grace and mercy has ended. And then it ain't going to happen. That's what happened with Pharaoh. Chapter 10. Even Pharaoh's officials had enough. They counseled Pharaoh to let the people go, for crying out loud. They're devastating us. But of course, Pharaoh wouldn't listen to them. You have the plague of locusts is next. The plague of darkness. And again, Pharaoh refuses to let the people go. Chapter 11, the last plague, the death of the firstborn, is reported. Now the Lord said to Moses, I will bring one more plague on Pharaoh and on Egypt. And after that, he will let you go from here. And when he does, he will drive you out of here completely. He's not going to waffle on this one. Chapter 7 prepares for that last plague. It's the institution of Passover. Each family was to take an unblemished 1-year-old lamb, roasted whole without breaking any of its bones. Classic picture of our Jesus, as Paul says, you, Jesus, are our Passover lamb. And the door frames of their houses was to be painted with the blood of the lamb, okay? This little diagram shows you kind of how they would paint the door frames and lintel that is above the door. And if you connect those dots, so to speak, guess what you form? A picture of what the blood of Jesus Christ is going to protect us from. Eternal death, just like it did Israelites against the death angel. Well, while the Israelites were eating the Passover, God's death angel would pass through Egypt, kill the firstborn of man and animals, except in those homes where the blood was on the door frames. After Pharaoh's son died, he told Moses to leave. Right now! Don't waste. The Egyptians even had urged the people to leave, giving them silver and gold and clothing and whatever else they could spare, just to move them on, get out of here. Here, take it, gold, please. The Israelites were in Egypt 430 years. Chapter 14. Aha! Pharaoh changes his mind. Follows the Israelites to recapture them. We've let all our slaves go, now what are we going to do, right? So when the Israelites realized that Pharaoh was coming after them, they complained to Moses, saying, it would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the desert, for crying out loud. Whose fool idea was this anyway? Moses encouraged the people, and I love this phrase. Do not be afraid, he said. Stand firm, and you will see the deliverance of the Lord and will bring to you today. Now notice this next line. The Egyptians you see today, you will never see again. Did people understand how? No, not at all. It was by faith again. So Moses raises his staff and the Red Sea divides into two so that the Israelites cross the sea on dry land. The Egyptians thought, hey, we can follow them. They pursue him, but Moses raises his staff again and the waters return. And Pharaoh and his army are fully destroyed. Fulfillment. You will never see these Israelites or these Egyptians again. When the Israelites saw the great power of the Lord displayed against the Egyptians, the people feared the Lord and put their trust in him and in Moses, his servant. Until the next problem. You could put in parentheses, right? Chapter 16, first problem to come around. Food runs out and the people again complain to Moses. God sends the manna. Do you know what the word manna in Hebrew means? What is it? That's what it means. They got out there that first morning gathering up the manna. They're all saying to each other, what is it? What is it? What is it? I don't know. What is it? That's its name. They never figured out what it was. Quail flies into the camp and the people are able to snag them for life. But the people were only to pick up enough manna for one day at a time. Except, of course, on the Sabbath, when they were to gather twice as much. You see, even then, God says, you accept life one day at a time. In chapter 17, the next place they camp, next problem, no water. Moses instructed to strike a rock and water would come from it. The writer of Hebrews says that that rock was Jesus Christ. Yeah. Then the Amalekites attacked Israel. The Israelites were victorious. So long as Moses stood with his hands in blessing out. Do you know how long you can stand like this?
Not very long.
Not very long. And the minute Moses' hands kind of drifted south, the Israelites were losing in the battle. And so one of the priests had to stand in front of Moses to prop up his arms. Evidently he was taller than Moses, so that his arms could rest on his shoulders. Okay? That's how they're victorious. Chapter 19, the Israelites arrive at Mount Sinai. Great. Here the people are to consecrate themselves to God while Moses and Aaron are summoned to the mountaintop. In chapter 20, we have the giving of the Ten Commandments. The people are too afraid to hear God's directly, so they ask Moses, you go, you talk to him. We don't want him. Okay, fine. In Exodus 21 through 23, God gave various applications of the law to specific life situations that Israel would be encountering. In chapter 24, the covenant between God and his people was confirmed again. And then in chapters 25 through 28, we have God's design for the tabernacle, the furniture in this house of worship, and the priestly garments that they were to wear while conducting worship. This gives you a little bit of a picture of an artist's description of what that tabernacle looked like. Okay? It had a fence around it, and then as you walk into the tabernacle area was the big bronze altar on which the sacrifices were made. Next to that was the basin where the priest would wash up after the sacrifice. It was a bloody mess. And then the tent of meeting, where the tabernacle itself was this tented building right here. And so let's open that up a little bit. In the first room of this tent was the holy place, okay? In it were 3 pieces of furniture: the candelabra to provide light, the table of showbread, and the altar of incense. These 2 rooms were then separated by a curtain. It is this curtain in Herod's temple that ripped from top to bottom when Jesus dies on the cross. Okay? And then the inner room, called the most holy place, had but 1 piece of furniture in, the altar, the Ark of the Covenant. Okay? It was in this Ark of the Covenant that 2 tablets of stone, the 10 Commandments, a bowl of manna, and Aaron's rod were deposited underneath the covenant. Okay? It's interesting when you take that tabernacle order and put it up and down and so forth, we see again not only how Jesus fulfilled the tabernacle, but even right down to the arrangement of the furniture. You see it, the arrangement of furniture really outlines a cross. God was already showing us what was coming and just how the furniture is arranged. In Exodus 29 through 30, the priests are consecrated. They take up their various activities in the tabernacle, and the remaining furniture and supplies for the tabernacle are all defined. Chapter 31, the skills of Bezalel and Hur are identified to build the tabernacle. And I really like this particular passage. I have filled him, God is speaking, with the Spirit of God, with skill, ability, knowledge, and all kinds of crafts. You've got crafts, you've got gifts, you've got abilities to draw, paint, work with wood, other kinds of craft. You know where that comes from? It is a gift of God's Holy Spirit. Marvelous, isn't it? In Exodus 32 is the story of the golden calf. Oh boy. Well, Moses up on Mount Sinai receiving the law, the people assume, well, Moses must have died because he ain't coming back. So they ask Aaron to make them a god so that they could worship. He makes them a golden calf, okay? Well, when Moses comes down the mountain, he is furious, takes those 2 tablets of stone and slams it on the ground, breaking them in half, or worse, burns the golden calf and then grinds it into powder and spreads it in the people's drinking water. Now drink that false god, will you? Not a real fun thing. Moses divides the faithful. He says, whoever is for the Lord, come to me. And then notice what he does next. Those did not step forward. Moses tells the Levites, kill them. Ouch. Those aspects of the Old Testament are hard for us to stomach, are they not? It seems so hard and factual that we could divide the company of believers in just that quick fashion. But again, those were different times, okay? Moses then prays for the people and says, but now please forgive their sin, O Lord. But if not, then blot me out of the book you have written. Note how Moses is offering himself in the people's place. If in fact God can't forgive their sins, then lay it on me and kill me instead. Talk about substitution atonement, huh? In chapter 34, Moses returns to Mount Sinai, but this time he had to chisel out the 2 new stone tablets himself. The first ones God gave him, which he, of course, broke, okay? When Moses comes down from the mountain, his face is glowing, being in the presence of God, so that he had to veil his face to talk to the people. It's kind of like looking at a big spotlight. You got to kind of, it's just a little bright to kind of look at. That's how Moses appeared to the people. In chapters 35 through 39 reports the actual construction of the temple, its furnishings, the high priest's garments, and then in chapter 40 the tabernacle was set up, and guess what? The glory of the Lord enters it. And that's the end of our reading. Comments or questions? Yeah, please.
At the end of Genesis, Jacob blesses each one of his sons.
Correct.
And some more harshly than others, but he really blesses Judah.
Right.
Why Judah and not Joseph? I guess Judah is now the line to Jesus.
Correct. That's why.
And then in that blessing, it looks like there's a lot of references to what's to come, to Jesus and everything else.
Oh yeah, very much so. And the blessing to Judah is very saturated with messianic prophecies. Okay? The line of Judah, the house of Judah, the king will arise, all those kind of statements. Very, very similar to what we hear come Christmas time. Absolutely. Kathy?
Reading when Moses was up on top of the mountain, he was up there for 40 days.
40 days.
Nights. Now it said without food or water.
Mm-hmm.
How could he have survived without water?
Well, ultimately I don't know, but I suspect, since he is in the presence of God, that God somehow nourished him miraculously, perhaps. I don't know. How did Jesus fast for 40 days and 40 nights in the wilderness?
One more thing.
So I think God sustained him. Yeah.
Okay. I had a hard time reading completely through these lessons because of the fact, one, the Lord was giving Moses all these things to do. Build the ark, 40 cubits to
Very, very specific.
And then I read through that part, and then I get to where Moses is building all this stuff, and it goes through the whole thing again. I thought, wait a minute, I thought, boy,
It's
boring.
repetitious. Exactly.
It got
Exactly.
very boring.
And Leviticus, the next reading, will be very similar to that when we look at the feast days and holidays of Israel. Okay? Those are enunciated twice at least, maybe more often. Okay? So yeah, there's some repetition in here. But interestingly enough, what it happens is you get a repetition, but they add little details that give you some nuances that you hadn't read in the first time around. It's kind of like why we have 4 gospel readings. I mean, all 4 gospels tell us about Jesus, right? Why not just one? Well, each of them have their own perspective on it, their own little emphasis that helps us see the bigger picture that just one could not provide. And so you got to look a little closer for those little details or little things that are just slight differences in that reading. And that will provide great research on it.
When I got to the point where Moses was making this stuff and they were going through all this again, I was tempted, well, I read this already.
Yeah. And that's normal. That's normal. Don't beat yourself up with that, okay? That's very normal for us to say, oh, I think I read this already, and then you want to skip ahead to the next whatever, okay? So that's very normal. Yes?
I was confused with, it's chapter 4, verse 24. Moses is coming back to Egypt.
Okay.
And the Lord confronted Moses, it seems. I'm not sure. It says the Lord confronted him and was about to kill him.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't say why, but then hurriedly, his wife then circumcised their son.
That's why.
But why was he going to kill Moses? I don't get it. Was it Moses that he was going to kill, or was it Gershom?
Well, the text isn't really specific, but it was specific because Moses, you're not following what Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob have been told by me to do to all males in your family. So wake up, guy.
Oh, okay.
Wake up, guy. And the wife finally, oh yeah, we didn't circumcise the kid. Okay? She goes ahead and does it, and then God is peace. Right? So we think that Moses was obstinately not following the directions that God had given. And he evidently knew. Okay? Evidently knew.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Question, what back?
I just noticed this, and you're going through this, but if Moses was born, or excuse me, if Moses was born, his mother put him in a basket, sent him down the river, Pharaoh's daughter adopts him. How does he know he's an Israelite? Pharaoh's daughter doesn't know where he came from. He just picked up a kid out of the river.
Pharaoh's daughter, the text tells us, recognizes that this was an Israelite. Okay? How did she know that? Probably the olive-colored skin or some other physical appearance of those children. Okay? Now, you say, well, aren't the Egyptians kind of olive-colored skin too? Yeah. But evidently there was enough to distinguish between the two where Pharaoh's daughter right away said, oh, this is an Israelite baby. She knew that right off the get-go.
Moses never really knew who his mother was. Nobody would have known.
Well, yes and no, because he does know he's got a brother and a sister, Aaron and Miriam, and they could well have told Moses about his mom. Okay? Now, we have no contact in Scripture where Moses actually meets his mom, talks with her, or whatever. It just doesn't say. So, did Moses meet her at any time? We don't know. We know that after the Pharaoh's daughter found him, Miriam quick runs up and said, hey, will we get some Israelite lady to take care of the kid? Yeah, that's a good idea, she goes. Well, why should I be messing around with a snot-nosed baby, right? So guess where Miriam takes Moses? Right back to her mom, his mom. Cool. She gets to raise her son until he's, weaned, and doesn't have to fear Pharaoh's, because Pharaoh's daughter said he lives. So, cool idea, right?
While you're on this, I thought that the staff that Moses used
Uh-huh.
for his 10 plagues was the one that was in the Ark of Covenant.
He did use that for, some of the plagues. He also used it to raise up over the Red Sea that parted, and he also threw it down and becomes a snake. It's the same staff.
So, but the thing that said there was Aaron's staff in there.
Well, yeah, in the Ark of the Covenant was Aaron's staff that budded. We're going to see that a little bit later, because Aaron's priesthood is going to be challenged a little bit later. Okay? And God simply said, I've chosen Aaron to be the priest, the high priest, and I'll show you and let his own wooden staff begin to blossom and bud forth. It's Aaron's staff that goes in the Ark of the Covenant, not Moses'. Okay? Two different staffs.
And Pharaoh gets killed. Pharaoh's actually with the army.
Yeah, we think so, yes.
So after that's all done, they got to pick a new Pharaoh, and
Bingo.
he didn't just send the army, he was with them.
He was with the army. Exactly. Yeah. Question, please.
How long did all that take place? All that plagues and...
That's a very good question. We don't really know. We think over a period, it's 430 years after Joseph, okay, that the Israelites are enslaved and so forth and so on, okay? How long that enslavement lasted, was it 5 years, 2 years, the end of that period? We don't really know. How long the plagues actually happened and were included, that, again, the Bible doesn't give us those parameters. We're guessing maybe a couple years. We don't know.
Because it said all the livestock died, but then it also said that when the locusts came, they killed all the livestock. I went, wait, the livestock already died.
Yeah. So there might be some time in between where, they were able to raise up their cattle production and replace them. Exactly.
And what does God mean by their stiff-necked people?
Stiff-necked people. Well, in German, we call it Dickkopf. Anybody know what a Dickkopf is? It's called thick head. Hard head. Stubborn. Set in your ways. Okay? That's the expression. Stiff-necked people, instead of turning one way or the other, I'm stiff-necked and I'm heading this way because this is my way, it's the right way. Okay? And don't tell me otherwise. Okay? No. So that's, yeah. Any other questions? Yeah, go ahead.
Pastor, it says that the Lord will be with war or at war with the Amalekites from generation to generation.
Yeah.
Who are they now? Do we know?
We don't. We don't. We think they were wiped out.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. No, there is no nation that says, we're from the Amalekites. Cool. Okay.
Yeah, I just didn't know if it was,
Yeah.
the countries that are, unrest countries in the Middle East, but.
Yeah, no.
Okay.
Not any connection today that we can make.
And then the sacrifices as they went through those, are they still being performed today by the Jewish
No.
people or?
No. The
Okay.
reason being is the Jews don't have a temple. They don't have a temple, they don't have a big altar and make the sacrifice. They do observe Passover, where they slaughter the lamb and use it and so forth and so on. But all the other burnt offerings, and Leviticus will be, the next book is the book you're going to read when you have trouble sleeping at night. Okay? I'm sorry to tell you, but that's very true.
Now, the Christian Jews, do they celebrate Passover?
Oh yeah, well, Christian Jews celebrate Passover as well, but they see it from a messianic fulfillment in Jesus. Correct. Exactly. Okay? Your hand up, Dean?
This is not a question, it's
Okay.
a comment.
Okay.
Why don't we, after the service, have questions that are answered in the back room for those people that are interested and don't understand? Because I know some people aren't interested in all these things after the service is over.
I guess that's an option. My thought to that is that sometimes questions that different people might ask might already be in the heads of somebody else and they're too afraid to ask. And so by answering that question of that individual, I'm answering 2 or 3 other questions that are in the heads of others that they're, for whatever reason, are not asking. So, and I think, if it's all answers you already know, I apologize for that. Thank the Lord that you already know, okay? But it can be a refresher, a review for us all. So, but yeah, we can certainly entertain that idea to say if there's anything more after a certain time, if there's more questions that still need to be taken care of, that we can jump in the back room so as not to extend the service longer than absolutely necessary. Is that fair? Yeah. Okay. All right. Let's go on with our offering, and then we'll finish up the service.